Hello there, welcome to a second thoughts overview of Grombrindal, the White Dwarf of the Dwarfs, of course. I played through the initial turns and got a feel for the faction. As I drew my conclusions, I'm now going to discuss those, help you guys plan out your playthroughs. So in the end, I'll give you some army composition, some fun ones as well that I believe I would like to try out. Now, this is not an in-depth guide, but will certainly help you out. Without wasting any more time, let's play with Grombrindal, the White Dwarf. So for your short victory, you need to destroy the faction of Nagaron, so that's Malekith, located very close by. You also need to occupy Loot Razor Sec, 30 different settlements. Very straightforward. It's a pretty straightforward campaign, quite normal to accomplish for the most part, so it shouldn't create too much issue. Now, the reward is plus 3 hero capacity for all heroes. This is also great, considering how useful they are for the Dwarf armies as well, and it should allow, like I always say, that you spend a little bit less time and resources on buildings for them. Now, the long victory requires you to achieve the short victory, occupy Loot Razor Sec 70 different settlements, and then to ensure that the total severity of grudges is no greater than 9. Current total severity is 25. More on that mechanic later, but it's not that difficult of a mechanic. It's a much longer campaign, yes, but with a bit more of a sandbox feel. So after defeating Necron, you're on your own, you can do whatever you wish, truly. So it does take a little bit of time, depending on how the grudges are looking, but more on that later. Now, the reward is actually plus 10 hero recruit rank, always useful to have better heroes right off the gate. It's very simple. Now, Grombrindal is a legendary warrior, so he benefits from having a higher evasion chance when using the underway, so all your characters are much better using the underway, really. And he does enjoy weapon strength plus 20% when fighting against elves for all armies, so for the most part this forces you a little bit into going for war versus most of the elves, of course. And then he can also call upon the power of the ancestor gods. More on that in just a few moments when I talk about the mechanics. Now, in terms of climate, I wish I could say it is average, but you do start so close to uninhabitable terrain, you know, and it would be so great to dominate this area, you know, this full area. Imagine if it was green. It would be much better, much easier, or even if this was yellow. So chaotic wasteland being red and, you know, uninhabitable is always a problem. So basically this is then a rather difficult campaign to dominate. Not as difficult as some, you know, but you're going against the elves and you also have an uninhabitable on the high elves there, so yeah, I'll declare it as average to good, you know. To get domination with this campaign, it's not as easy, and the biggest part is that you start nearby this where you would have to go for it, so yeah, that's a big problem. So your starting province is a 3-settlement province. You do start on a minor settlement, but it does have a specific building there that will assist you, especially with the research rate, for instance, and the control faction wide. That also helps. Some income is always good. Now, typical expansion is to actually take care of the nearby enemies and continue to take care of them. Attempt to move out into Nagaron territory to likely defeat them very early. That would be the best way, because Valkia from the north will show up, and then you'll have vampire coasts with Silostra and Torax moving in towards you. So controlling this sort of area would be essential to try and have secure, you know, a solid front, a solid base, in order for you to expand later on into further conquests. That's the idea. The biggest issue with this starting province as well is that it's quite pretty expanded, really. You're gonna have issues if you're attacked from behind, for instance here, where you're gonna have to use that underway. It's good that you have that bonus, because you're gonna have to use that underway to try and minimize any counterattacks from the enemy, which will happen, therefore. So, diplomatically, you're still part of the Order Tide, although High Elves and Wood Elves may become your target later on, given your bonuses as well. At the start, Dark Elves, Beastmen with Torax, Vampire Coast, Warriors of Chaos with Valkia, Norska, you name it. You're surrounded in a very difficult position, very few trade deals that you're going to have. So sending out a hero or something to gather some intel on faraway places may be very profitable in the later on, you know. So therefore, outposts may be difficult to obtain early on, but the likely Empire or Bretonnia with some cavalry is what you're typically aiming at. So in terms of mechanics, let's start with the Forge. It's a very basic crafting mechanic that allows you to build a variety of items, including weapons, armor, talismans, enchanted items. It's really cool. You also have character runes, which you're going to use on characters, of course. But you also have banner runes, and these are to use on your units. They'll provide some specific ones, for instance, to assign an artillery unit explosive damage that reduces enemy leadership, which is always nice. Okay, so basically you should explore these and check out the ones that you may want for specific units, for specific army compositions, of course. Then, of course, you can also recycle these, gaining some oath gold from items that you no longer wish to have. Okay, now this is a very good mechanic to ensure that you get better characters overall, that you can customize them with the items as well, and of course with the units, which is really cool. Now, we also have the Great Book of Grudges. From time to time, basically this consists mainly of missions. So for instance, to win 3 battles against Nagarond, that will give you Oath Gold and this Master Rune of Stromny Redbeard. So basically, the more grudges that you have in this book, the more missions, the more you're gonna have to clean it up, because, you know, of course, if any one faction wrongs you, you have a grudge against them and your people want it solved. So the main idea here is that if you have very low ones, you benefit from these buffs: diplomatic relations, research rate, which is excellent, minus construction costs for all buildings, which is always nice. But the more you get into higher severity, the more you get penalties. So penalties to research rate, penalty to the diplomatic relations with dwarves, but at the same thing you do get something extra, which is a higher chance that you get slayers to the Regiment of Renown. So if you have a lot of grudges, if you don't complete them, let me show you with this, then you're gonna have more slayers here, because of course the higher chance to replenish here. I already have some giant slayers to recruit, but of course I can't because I lack the money. But yeah, this is also a good countering mechanic, so you may wish to have, you know, access to slayers really fast, so you just let the grudges build up, or perhaps you wish for that research rate or construction cost to benefit you, so you just try to keep this as low as possible. Up to you. Now remember that the grudges need to be very low, under 9, so that you can even complete the long victories. So you gotta be wary of that. So another mechanic in specific to Grombrindal is that he has the powers of the ancestor gods. From time to time he will receive an event like this, to receive boons either to his army combat prowess, as you can see there, more melee attack, more melee defense, which is always nice, or he can get more global effects, or for, you know, for his army in this case, but for the campaign, so casual replenishment rate, control, corruption, or he can get those global effects. This is what I wanted to mention, so research rate, less upkeep for the army, that's always nice, or he even can get something for his own combat prowess. So if you wish for Grombrindal to become really a nightmarish lord for the enemies to deal with, by all means you can take this. So always choose wisely to ensure that you get what is best for the current circumstances of your campaign. So another mechanic of sorts is the Rune of Magic. Basically, the dwarfs have a different system in place, no winds of magic. They have cooldowns, which apply to each caster, implying that having one caster is typically enough in your armies, really. So once you affect one unit, for instance, then every single other one will have a cooldown of 60 seconds before you can use another rune. So you kind of have to be specific about it, have to be careful on that regard, so that you can, you know, benefit which ones you prefer in a better way, of course. So yeah, just that for you guys to remember. So in terms of edicts, you have a control plus corruption edict, very useful one, especially in higher difficulties. An income from buildings edict. Then you have recruitment cost and local recruitment capacity, of course useful if you're trying to build up an army really fast. And the most basic one that probably you're going to have all the time, especially building up, growth, construction cost, and tradable resources. This is really good one to ensure that, you know, your you can build up, you can grow your faction, of course, tech up. So yeah, for the most part, I'll likely use that one. In terms of army stances, you do have the underway, which under Grombrindal, it has the advantage that they can't be intercepted as easily. They have an advantage. All your armies have an advantage using the underway in terms of interception chance. But it's basically to move through impassable terrain. So, for instance, I cannot put it right now, but it would allow me to move, for instance, here. It does have a movement range, but it would allow me to move outside, across the mountains, for instance, or across even the sea. It just allows that sort of tactical advantage. You also have encamp, which allows replenishment, and immune to attrition, which is the two key ones. It does cost 50% move points to set it up. And you also have raiding, which also costs 50% movement range. It does give you immunity to most attrition, which is always excellent, but remember all the penalties with the vigor in battle, with the income from all buildings, so be careful with that. And then, of course, ambush with 25% movement cost. You've all heard of these ones, of course, with a typical forced march. Yeah, all fine and dandy. Typical good ones for army stances, especially with the underway. It's very tactical, so it's very useful. And in terms of the province edicts, as you've seen, it's decent. I wish there was a research one, but well, you can't ask for everything. So in terms of buildings, first Dracula Spire, where you start, it actually has that unique building. It gives you more income, oath gold per turn, a healthy amount, research rate, which is always great, some controlled faction wide, which is always nice, and then some recruit rank for gyrocopters and iron drakes, which is also faction wide. So it's really great. It allows you to build this up, and you don't have to worry of having those buildings for the gyrocopters, for the iron drakes in that province, even though you may want that, of course. Now, in terms of full military province, you require 6 buildings, basically. You do have this extra one for having some thanes and some more recruitment, but you also get the thane here, on a tier 3. So yeah, this is mainly to get a little bit more capacity and rank for the thanes as well. So you have 6 military buildings. 2, the barracks and the ranger barracks, can be built on minor settlements. There are no tier 5 units whatsoever, implying that actually they reach their elite units much faster. Tier 2 and 3 units will definitely surprise you. Even basic infantry have a lot of staying power, which is great. In terms of infrastructure, you do have a growth and replenishment building. You have a basic income building. It does provide quite a lot. You have a trade resource with the dwarf beer, which you cannot be produced anywhere else, so it's really useful, and control building. And then you have a jack of all trades, like I like to say. Oath gold per turn, income from trade, tradable resources produced, and income from all buildings. So always nice, especially in the beginning where you want to get a little bit more oath gold to get specific items. It's always cool. You're lacking in the nearby area of some mines that actually cause the other dwarf leaders to become rich, so your income overall for Grombrindal may prove quite a challenge. You have the Ancients mechanic to get by, so be sure that you focus on that as well to ensure that you get a little bit more money there, or at least less construction costs, less upkeep, as I'm mentioning. Now, research, it's one of the best around. It will take ages to finish. I'll just put this one up just for you to realize it will take 57 turns to take 49 turns here, so it takes 36 turns for here. So yeah, it's gonna take quite a while. Just ensure that the research rate is pumped up as best as possible, and especially with Grombrindal, he does manage to get good buffs in terms of research rate. Now, for the most part, it's subdivided. Like this area around here is mostly for income, for campaign stuff, and then this area here is regarding the units. So by all means, study it a little bit. I can't study it with you guys here, but it does have a lot of stuff commenting, for instance, here with better stuff for slayers, for instance, or even better stuff for gyrocopters there, for flame cannons. But yeah, suffice it to say that after you can fully complete the research, the tech tree, sorry, your armies are crazy good. So it's one of the best things for the dwarves, true. As always, you have your lord specific skills, or the legendary skills in this case, the yellow line or caster line. You're not going to have a lot of them because only the rune lords have. You have the the army or red line, as it's mentioned typically, and the blue line or campaign. Now, starting with the blue line, it has a nice surprise for Grombrindal, because his effects are actually nearly for all faction wide. So, for instance, you can get more rank for your armies faction wide. You can get better, less recruitment costs for all armies. I've went with more movement range, which is excellent. It's very tactical, and with casualty replenishment rate for all characters, which is great. It's really a huge one. It allows you not only to have this, but also to avoid having to resort to that one in other characters as well, or to resort to other stuff like the recruit rank. It basically allows you to have some good buffs overall. And then global recruitment capacity +1. Of course, you can also get lightning strike here. Now, in terms of the red line, it's probably one of the best in the game. It has good compositions and alternatives, more on that later, but without spending too much. That's the main point. For the Grombrindal himself, of course, how he actually buffs up most of his army, it's excellent, so that you can combine with the red line and get some solid compositions or unique compositions really well. There's no hero actually that provides replenishment, but they all help out the army in one way or another. Even with just the runesmith with the casting abilities, of course, they do get some specific abilities here, for instance, that you can get for more armor for all your units, or for better weapons, missile and melee damage increased. So for sure you can have, if you have a couple of them, you can use one for sharpened weapons, the other one for hardened armor, so that you get that bonuses for your whole army, and it all adds up. That's the main point. And then you also have the master engineers, for instance, that prove invaluable for their abilities with ranged units. So starting with the red line here for the dwarf units, they have some great combinations, such as, for instance, Iron Drakes, which you do have an anti-large and anti-infantry unit there, and the flame cannon, so it's all in one, which is really good. It allows some possibilities. And then, for instance, you also have this possibility for the elite units, which includes an anti-infantry, anti-large unit, as well as a front line, which is great. It just allows you to have several roles in just one skill, so that you can be quite effective. Now, moving on. Grombrindal actually buffs a little bit Quarrelers, a lot of Iron Drakes, and some war machine units, such as the artillery units or the gyrocopters. So yeah, doing some theory crafting in terms of armies, this is what I would likely do. Just get a good solid front line, and then some Iron Drakes and some flame cannons, because remember, they are on the same red line skill, so it will save up some skills for him. Or then you can get just some Quarrelers with some organ guns for some support, and still don't spend too much, still with the same type of front line. Just one extra giant slayer here, because you don't have a lot of anti-large here on this army, so just getting a little bit more anti-large. Or just theory crafting a fun composition here with just all ranged, because focusing on the Quarrelers, on the fact that your army gets more armor piercing damage, maybe as well with the ancestors stuff, so you can probably buff up the whole army to the point that these guys become a good front line. So yeah, just go crazy with it, just have some fun. That's the whole purpose of this. Now, the remaining 2 pages that I'm showing here is just about the same composition that I've improved on before. Just some basic comps using either long beards or the iron breakers with hammers with giant slayers, of course. These all benefit from the same skill line, that's why it's so cool. Some benefits here with some rangers and some gyrocopters, just for some fun, just to get to use those units as well, or the typical one that you saw me use previously, but in this case with just some organ guns instead of the flame cannons. Now, I always recommend that you have at least one caster and one melee lord, or in this case a ranged lord with the engineers, because the engineer, you can place it nearby the artillery and make it much more effective. And then these are some sweeper armies, basically cheaper armies that you can get that are still quite effective against most enemies, and it will allow you to, of course, embrace some different units in your armies to benefit from those, of course, or to just, if you get some longbeards in the early game and you get to upgrade them really well, they become really powerful, then you can use them on a specific army just to ensure that, it's not wasted money. You get to recuperate the lost money of the investment in longbeards up until well into the late game. Just use these guys as sweepers. Don't put them against a stack of chosen, but you can put them against nearly anything else. They'll do really well. So Grombrindal's position would make it an interesting campaign regardless, always, because it's so far away from the other dwarf units, so yeah. But his different skills and even that mechanic alone give it a cherry on top. It's not the most interesting faction to play as well, but definitely a bit of an improvement overall. Now it will be a tough one. Timing is essential. If you spread too far away, if you go too much to the north or to the south, then you may be attacked from the other side for certain. It will not be it will not be long before you're fighting a two-pronged war, either against Valky if she becomes powerful, as you've seen here, or against Harganeth, which I'm already at war with, and then against Taurox or Silostra. She'll declare soon, that's for sure, so yeah. It will not be long before you're fighting in two fronts, so be ready for it, embrace it, and then lead Grombrindal to victory. Now, in terms of your army, it consists of great infantry, great artillery and missiles, average flyers, really, and no cavalry, no single entities, no typical magic. They're still quite a balanced out faction, and especially they are one of the most beneficial factions in terms of outposts. If you can get some outposts for them with some cavalry, then they'll just shine, really. Replenishment is average to good. There's no hero to assist. Climate may help in that regard or may hinder you, so it's a bit difficult for Grombrindal, but I believe you can manage. Now, it is time now to go to the north and fight for Grombrindal, the White Dwarf.